from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences, like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong, in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
The planned departure of South Koreans detained in Georgia in a U.S. immigration sweep has been put on hold due to circumstances on the U.S. side, said Seoul's foreign ministry. Seoul is working with Washington to enable an early departure as soon as possible. A $120 billion public-private fund called the Public Growth Fund has been launched under the Lee Jae-myung administration to drive investment in AI and other advanced fields. Also on Wednesday, South Korea's KOSPI hit a 4-year intraday high, driven by expectations of easing criteria for major shareholders subject to stock transfer taxes. We start with the situation in the U.S. state of Georgia, where around 300 Korean workers were arrested last week at a Hyundai LG Energy battery plant site. They were expected to come home within the next day, but their departure has suddenly been delayed. We have our foreign affairs correspondent, Oh Soo-young, here in studio. Welcome, Soo-young.
Great to join you again, Tammy.
So, Soo-young, the detainees were supposed to come home within the next 24 hours, but obviously there have been some problems.
Yes, it was a very abrupt announcement by the Foreign Ministry this very afternoon, where they said that the 300 or so South Koreans detained in the Georgia Immigration Detention Center will not be able to depart by chartered flight on Wednesday local time. Now, this is due to what the ministry described as circumstances on the US side. I spoke to an official who indicated that South Korea, that is the government, companies and the chartered airline, were in full preparation for a Wednesday departure. Local reports even indicate that the companies were helping the detainees ship their luggages to Korea separately. So for a reason that is currently unknown and undisclosed to us right now, it seems that the United States is stalling the process. The ministry says negotiations are ongoing, but given that it's still very early in the morning over there. It seems the issue will unlikely be resolved before Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and Secretary of State Marco Rubio meet. However, even if the two officials resolve to release the detainees as soon as possible, it seems it's going to be quite difficult to determine when exactly the next flight can be arranged, as it obviously takes logistical preparation for the airline company, which has to follow certain aviation safety standards and procedures.
Right, so the good news is that Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is in the U.S. to get things moving swiftly, and he'll meet with Rubio on Wednesday, right, not Tuesday?
That's right. On Wednesday, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is going to meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the White House. And before departing for D.C. on Monday, Cho said that he's going to ensure the Korean detainees do not face disadvantages, such as entry bans upon future visits to the U.S. And beyond the immediate issues at hand, the minister also said he's going to try to turn this crisis into an opportunity to improve U.S. visa tracks for Korean firms. Now, it's an issue that President Lee Jae-myung has raised for the sustainability of Korean investment in America and their economic partnership. Before his sit-down with Rubio, Cho on Tuesday held a roundtable in D.C. with representatives from LG, Hyundai, Samsung, POSCO, SK, among other Korean firms, to hear their concerns. And, well, companies are calling for two main visa tracks. First, a new E4 visa quota under the long-sought Partner with Korea Act, which would allow up to 15,000 skilled Korean professionals to work in the U.S. each year. Now, this legislation was actually introduced in 2013 after the Korea-US FTA took effect in 2011, but the act hasn't gotten enough traction to pass through Congress until now. So that's what they want to see done. And second, Korean firms would like higher approval rates for E2 visas on jobs created through foreign investment. Now, this would pertain to staff employed by Korean-invested plants in the US. By comparison, other countries who have FTAs with the US, they have dedicated visa tracks. Canada and Mexico, for instance, they enjoy unlimited non-immigrant professional visas under the North Korea FTA. Australia, meanwhile, has over 10,000 annual E3 visas, while Singapore and Chile, they've secured hundreds of short-term working visas through trade agreements. So Korea, on the other hand, obviously there's a big contrast there. It has none of such dedicated visa tracks. And experts say that the Trump administration must recognize that structural support for Korean professionals is absolutely necessary in order to build America's long-term capacity in key sectors.
Industries like battery manufacturing and shipbuilding require highly specialized skills that cannot be transferred through short-term training alone. If foreign experts are allowed only as trainers, not as part of the core workforce, companies may face productivity gaps that delay factory completion. It may also slow investment returns and disrupt the U.S. electric vehicle supply chain.
So if I'm not wrong, it looks like the White House has also acknowledged that it needs to, comprehensively address this issue, right?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So it was initially quite unclear, and it still remains quite uncertain how different US agencies were coordinating on the issue. And the immigration authorities that conducted the raid, for instance, Georgia state authorities, the Department of Homeland Security and the Commerce Department, all different players, right? So on Tuesday, the White House press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, reiterated President Donald Trump's remarks from a few days earlier, saying that he appreciates foreign investment in the US, particularly in specialized sectors like semiconductors and batteries, but he's putting an emphasis on American jobs.
And so he expects these foreign companies to hire American labor. We want Americans to have these jobs. Americans need these jobs, but he also understands the need for these companies to bring over their workers who already have these skills.
She said the Department of Homeland Security and Commerce are coordinating on this under Trump's quote-unquote nuanced, responsible and sensible approach. Now, this response comes in light of global media reports and concerns raised over how the recent raid could compromise the $12.6 billion South Korean investment in the state of Georgia. Now, we're going to have to see what Cho and Rubio discuss and the outcome of their talks on Wednesday, but the stakes are incredibly high for both countries. Without providing structural administrative support support for Korean professionals and firms in key industrial sectors, it's really hard to see investment in America as a feasible option, not only for Korean companies, but all global businesses.
Indeed, let's hope to see this crisis turn into an opportunity, like the Minister Cho Hyun said. And we also hope to see the swift return of Korean nationals arrested in the U.S., right?
That's right, Tammy.
All right, Soo-young, thank you so much for your report, as always.
Thanks for having me.
President Lee Jae-myung announced a massive investment fund today to help jumpstart South Korea's economy by strengthening its competitiveness in cutting-edge technology. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin has more.
There's a new game changer in the silent war of high-tech industries. On Wednesday, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung announced the creation of a so-called National Growth Fund, a massive public-private investment fund aimed at raising 150 trillion won, or about $108 billion over the next 5 years. That's 50 trillion more than what the administration initially planned.
무역 장벽 강화, 통상 환경 불확실성 같은 이 어려운 시기에 미국, 중국 등의 주요국들이 첨단 전략 산업의 대규모 또 국가적인 투자 지원을 확대하고 있습니다. 국민 성장 펀드는 정체된 우리 산업에 새롭게 활력을 불어넣을 것입니다.
Half of the funding will come from the government, with the rest raised through private channels from corporations, financial institutions, pension funds, and even the general public. The fund will target industries such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, clean energy, and biotechnology. Another focus will be supporting startups and small and medium-sized companies.
벤처기업의 성장, 또 혁신적인 기술이 우리 대한민국의 미래 성장 동력입니다. 그동안에는 대기업 성장 그리고 선진국 추격에 국가 자원을 집중 투입하고 벤처 혁신기업 육성에 다소 부족한 면이 있었던 게 사실입니다.
For that, industry insiders who attended Wednesday's presentation urged a shift from short-term to long-term investment and called for measures to ensure effective use of funds.
Investment is about backing capable people with high chances of success. What really matters is who has the foresight to choose them. And there should be at least 2 decision makers involved so that outcomes can be compared and healthy competition, as well as cooperation, can take place.
This comes as South Korea grapples with a potential growth rate projected to dip below 1%. Whether this initiative can reignite Korea's economic momentum remains to be seen. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And earlier today, the nation's benchmark KOSPI hit its all-time high, breaking its last record set 4 years ago. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
A new milestone for the nation's benchmark KOSPI on Wednesday as it hit a new intraday trading record of 3,317.77. This comes as it opened at 3,272.20 before climbing through the day. At around 2:30 p.m., the index hit the new record high, passing 3,316.08 set in June 2021. The index also surpassed its highest ever closing price set in July 2021 by closing at 3,314.53. Analysts say there are multiple factors for this, both external and domestic.
The primary external factor is that the U.S. stock market continues to hit all-time highs amid growing expectations for a Federal Reserve interest rate cut. Domestically, expectations have grown that the current threshold for large shareholders might be maintained.
The U.S. and Japan also both saw their stocks hit all-time highs on Tuesday amid hopes of rate cuts. And as for the changes for the large shareholder threshold, to further explain, recently the Lee Jae-myung administration has said the current 5 billion won threshold for being classed as a large shareholder will be lowered to 1 billion won. This caused concerns for many investors, but there are hopes that at President Lee Jae-myung's 100-day press conference on Thursday to reaffirm his KOSPI 5,000 pledge, he could suggest a possible reversal of the plan to lower the threshold. This also stirred up foreign investment on Wednesday. In addition, Korean tech stocks have benefited as the government has been emphasizing its desire to invest in artificial intelligence, and foreign IT companies who purchase Korean chips have been performing strongly.
Amid solid earnings from overseas companies like Oracle, the scope of gains expanded, centered on industries with high connectivity to them.
Following that sentiment, shares in chipmaker SK Hynix jumped over 5.5% to a record high, while Samsung Electronics also finished in positive territory. Security firms also saw strong gains on the back of the policy expectations, adding to the market's overall momentum. 김도현, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's labor market showed resilience in August with a record high employment rate for the month. However, while the high rate was seen, some concerns linger, such as the youth unemployment rate and sluggish hirings in certain sectors. Our Park Junan reports.
Employment in South Korea exhibited strong gains in August, with the employment rate hitting a record high for the month. According to Statistics Korea's monthly employment data released on Wednesday, August employment rate was 63.3%. This is 0.1 of a percentage point higher than the same month last year. The data indicated that the number of employed persons in August increased by 166,000 year-on-year to around 29 million. However, the growth pace has moderated from July's addition of 171,000 and the overall monthly average of 178,000 for the first 8 months of 2025. The services industry drove the gains, adding 484,000 new jobs for the month, led by a surge of 304,000 people added in the healthcare and social welfare sectors, due to growing demand for elderly care and public job programs. In contrast, the manufacturing sector extended its 14-month year-on-year decline, losing 61,000 jobs in August. The pace of the decline, however, has narrowed amid easing external risks following the U.S. tariff deal and improving exports. The construction sector shed 132,000 positions as it experienced its 16th consecutive month of a drop in the number of new hires due to a decrease in the number of completed new houses. An age breakdown revealed stark disparities in the number of new hires. Among those aged 60 and older, the number jumped by 401,000, while new hires for those aged 15 to 29 saw a 219,000 drop. Notably, the number of people in their 30s who were not actively seeking employment reached 328,000, an increase of 19,000 from a year earlier. This marks the highest August figure since relevant statistics began being compiled in 2003. The government pledged its commitment to foster youth-favored jobs through AI innovation and 30 flagship projects under its new economic strategy. It also said the second distribution of livelihood recovery consumption coupons, which is scheduled for September 22nd, will be made without delay. And measures to stabilize livelihoods during the Chuseok holiday will also be promptly prepared. Park Junan, Arirang News.
As the buzz around advanced battery technology continues to grow, the global push for clean energy is driving an unprecedented demand for smarter, more efficient, and eco-friendlier power solutions. Our Moon Jeong has more from the K-Battery Show 2025.
As the global battery market faces accelerating supply chain realignment and tightened regulations, battery companies are navigating a landscape that demands not only technological competitiveness, but also supply chain resilience. Marking its 4th annual edition, the K-Battery Show 2025, one of the largest exhibitions for secondary battery materials, components, and equipment in South Korea, officially opened its doors on Wednesday. The 3-day exhibition aims to unveil the future of the secondary battery industry amidst these challenging yet pivotal times. The exhibition highlights a comprehensive array of innovations, covering essential products such as cathodes, anodes, and electrolytes, alongside the intricate components and advanced manufacturing equipment. A major highlight this year is a special hall featuring energy storage systems and electric vehicle charging technologies, presenting next-generation solutions and global technology trends that will shape our future. Beyond the latest materials and equipment, the show also delves deep into cutting-edge battery charging systems, robust charging infrastructure, and crucial recycling technologies, all while emphasizing critical safety measures. Companies such as GEVR provide a solution for battery fires that can occur in various industrial sectors, including EVs, ESSs, and drones.
Robust safety measures are crucial to effectively utilize, reuse, and recycle EV batteries, requiring specialized safety equipment for lithium batteries. Should a fire occur, even if a robot attempts to disconnect a battery, it would sustain damage due to its own onboard battery. I believe the automatic immersion tank we've developed for battery packs will serve as a vital fire-fighting solution.
Such advancements in safety are part of a broader commitment that extends beyond technology to sustainability. Leading the charge in environmental stewardship, Korean battery companies are actively propelling eco-friendly practices towards a sustainable and greener future. 문지영, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung is set to hold a press conference on Thursday to mark his first 100 days in office. Now, under the slogan, 100 Days for Recovery, Growth for the Future, the press conference will last about 90 minutes with more than 150 reporters. He's expected to address a wide range of topics, including his vision on seeking new growth engines and improving people's livelihoods. And eyes are on what message he will share when it comes to peace on the Korean Peninsula, as well as a follow-up tariff negotiations with the U.S. Pending issues also include follow-up measures to reform aimed at reducing prosecutors' powers. Now, this is the second time that President Lee has held a presser since taking office in June. Now, over in Europe, tensions are mounting after Polish forces intercepted Russian drones that intruded into the country's skies. It marks a dangerous first for NATO, prompting consultations with allies on a coordinated response. Our Park Gon-woo has the latest.
Polish armed forces shot down Russian drones aiming at Ukraine after they hovered around Poland's airspace. On Wednesday, the Polish government said more than 10 drones were detected, and those posing threats were neutralized. This marks the first time the NATO country has taken down such assets since the Ukrainian war began. Poland briefly closed its airspace and launched a military operation overnight, joined by NATO aircraft to ensure safety. No casualties were reported, but efforts to search for debris are underway. Residents in regions along the Ukrainian border were advised to stay at home and avoid touching any suspicious objects until the operation was completed. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk immediately convened an emergency government meeting earlier in the day.
All our allies are taking the situation very seriously. I am in constant contact with the NATO Secretary General. This is so that we can respond to this type of threat as effectively as we did.
As any attack on a NATO member state is regarded as an attack on the alliance as a whole, concerns are growing over the war in Ukraine widening. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned on social media that this sets an extremely dangerous precedent for Europe, calling for a NATO-style joint response and sanctions on Russia. He added that more weapons are needed to contain Moscow, saying the country must feel that the war cannot be expanded and will have to be ended. With tensions rising, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU stands in full solidarity with Poland. And a NATO official also said the alliance is in consultations with Warsaw, hinting at further coordination with allies if its security is threatened. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
In the heart of Seoul, tradition meets the senses. A new concert series at Namsangol Hanok Village blends Korean classical music with a perfume-making experience, giving audiences a chance to both hear and take on the memory. Our Pyongyang has more.
On a Friday night in central Seoul, the sound of traditional Korean string instruments echoes through a Hanok courtyard. This marks the opening of a special performance series at Namsangol Hanok Village. The series is called 취향, or Taste. Written two different ways in Hanja, it means both personal preference and to take scent, a clever play on words. Here, the audience members not only enjoy live music, but also create their own perfumes inspired by the performance.
Our concert series is about embracing different cultural tastes. From traditional gugak to classical and indie bands, we showcase a variety of performances. And through the fragrance-making experience, audience members can create and take home a scent that matches their own taste, a way of carrying their personal experience and individuality with them.
Opening the series is the gugak trio Trigger. The gentle yet strong melodies of the Kayagum, Komungo, and Ajeng captivate the audience.
Traditional instruments are especially fitting in a Hanok setting. Performing with natural acoustics lets the audience hear the true sound of the instruments. We hope they can also feel the natural rhythm and subtle vibrations we share.
The performance doesn't stop when the music ends. Right behind me, audience members are now taking part in a scent-making workshop, capturing what they just heard and felt in a bottle.
Participants browse through a variety of scents before a perfume expert blends them into a fragrance, turning the concert into a lasting memory.
It was a magical experience, honestly, because I honestly felt like a young band that had his musicians playing for him. I only missed maybe like Macaulay to fully enjoy it, but it was mesmerizing. So as I was listening to the songs, the first one actually did remind me of a forest and kind of the rainy smell of it. So being able to encapsulate that experience in a perfume, which I will later use on myself, each time I put it on, I will be reminded of this, so it's great.
Taste features traditional Korean music throughout September, before branching into jazz and classical music in October. The series runs every Friday until November 7th. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
It has been raining heavily this week, but Seoul had a clear sky without any clouds today. Under clear skies, Seoul rose up to 32 degrees Celsius and Chuncheon rose up to 31 degrees, still feeling hot during the day. This heat above 30 degrees will continue for the time being. This morning, we started off with a temperature of 18.4 degrees Celsius in Seoul. During the day, the sun will shine strongly on the clear sky and rise to 32 degrees Celsius tomorrow. There will be huge differences between the daily highs and lows. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 20 degrees, Daejeon and Daegu at 19 degrees. Highs will rise up to 30 to 32 degrees in most parts of the country. On Saturday, it will rain across the country with daytime temperatures of 27 degrees Celsius in Seoul, showing early autumn weather. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stooky that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 에이펙은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 에이펙 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. This year marks 8 decades since the Korean peninsula was split in two, an unresolved legacy of the Cold War that has only grown more complex. As tensions sharpened between the U.S., ROK, Japan alliance, and the North Korea, China, Russia bloc, the region is now seen by many as the front line of a new Cold War. Now, recent displays of military solidarity among the three countries backing the North and the regime's accelerating weapons tests are raising new alarms. At the same time, Europe is stepping closer to Indo-Pacific security, and defense ties between South Korea and EU nations are expanding. So today, we examine what a 21st century strategy for unification and peace might look like and what the global community's role should be. And for that, we invite Dr. Eric Balbach, Korea Foundation Fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, here in the studio with us. A big welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. So let's start right away. So like I've said, this year marks 80 years since Korea's division, and the peninsula now really sits at the center of a new Cold War dynamic. Like I've said, U.S., ROK, Japan, and on the other side, North Korea, China, and Russia, of course. So Dr. Balbach, at this point in time, what do you see as the core strategic challenges for Korea's unification and national security?
You know, the closer relations between China, North Korea, and Russia certainly are a consequential shift, strategic shift in Northeast Asia, what we're currently seeing. What we didn't so far see is true trilateral coordination between the three countries. And we know that because North Korea too usually prefers bilateral approach to its counterparts. And to that end, what we saw last week was highly symbolic, and we should take this very serious, of course, but we haven't seen yet a de facto trilateralism among the three countries. It nonetheless has, of course, immediate implications both for South Korea's security, national security, and also for its unification strategy, in the sense that closer coordination, even on the bilateral level between North Korea and China, between North Korea and Russia, certainly complicates South Korea's approach to unification. It strengthens North Korea's strategic value within this trilateral format. And it certainly has a detrimental effect to South Korea's national security strategy, in the sense that this close military cooperation we are just seeing and observing between North Korea and Russia, of course, has an immediate impact on South Korea's national security.
Right. So like you said, last week in China's Victory Day parade, the leaders of North Korea, China, and Russia really showcased a strong alignment, solidarity. So if this unity evolves into a sustained alliance, how do you think we should be able to respond to that?
You know, in a way, of course, South Korea should continue to foster its own trilateralism between South Korea, Japan, and the US. But it should also look at strengthening and diversifying its security relations beyond those two countries. And this is where Europe comes in, of course. And while Europe is not a strategic player, we've seen in the last couple of years how close also our relations on security issues like cybersecurity, economic security, and supply chains, but also we have a very close relation now in the defense sector between our countries. And all of this just goes to show how important it is that both Europe but also South Korea looks at diversifying its relations beyond Japan and the US. But these, of course, these two countries, of course, are the core for South Korea and remain the core of South Korea's national security outlook in the region.
Right. So like you said, it could be an opportunity to expand its reach and also, further cooperate with EU nations as well. Now, following the parade last week, North Korea and China held a summit, but without any mention about North Korea's denuclearization. And that kind of raised concerns that China may now be kind of tacitly accepting North Korea's nuclear status. What do you think is how do you read into the situation?
You know, for quite a while we saw that South Korea has a different prioritization when it comes to its foreign policy objectives regarding North Korea compared to South Korea, the US, Japan, but also Europe. We see that China is very eager to secure regime stability, and this is the main priority of China. They don't like to see a nuclear North Korea, but they don't want to see a destabilized or an unstable North Korea. This is their first foreign policy objective when it comes to North Korea. And we see a difference here in how we prioritize our foreign policy objectives here. And this is, of course, a huge issue in this sense, in the sense that for South Korea, of course, finding a direct channel to North Korea is extremely complicated at the moment, but as we see, even for the US and also for Europe. And I think this is where we have to look very closely how China reacts now in the next couple of months, if this is truly a tactical acceptance of North Korea's nuclear status, or if it's more of a symbolic trilateralism due to the developments we saw last week.
Mm-hmm. So whether it's an acceptance or it's a means to reach to their goal, which is for North Korea's regime to be stable?
Exactly, because this is their main foreign policy priority with regard to North Korea. And this is how the Chinese often say it: we give them enough to survive, but not enough to prosper. North Korea now, of course, with its closer coordination with Russia, has a second angle to cooperation in the region. And I think this is a main reason why Kim Jong-un also went to China. It has a domestic political but also foreign policy angle to it, in the sense that North Korea aims at closer relations now again with China, which is still, even in times of closer coordination with Russia, China is still the major and main security and mainly economic partner of North Korea. Mm-hmm. And we saw that after the COVID lockdown in North Korea, these relations, especially the high-ranking, high-level diplomatic relations, cooled down. And North Korea usually tries to avoid this over-dependence on one side, which they were forced to in the last couple of years due to a lack of alternatives. Now, of course, we see a traditional North Korean playbook of using or leaning closer to one side and then try to reverse it, lean closer to the other side, and try to profit as much as they can from this.
Mm-hmm. So as for North Korea's side, you know, it's a good opportunity for them to have both Russia and China on the table.
Yes, we have to say that North Korea arguably is in the best strategic position it has been for a very long time, in the sense that both China and Russia seek closer cooperation with North Korea now. For China, due to the US-China conflict, and for Russia, of course, in the context of its war against the Ukraine, which North Korea, of course, was a very early supporter.
Mm-hmm. Now, and thanks to, you know, the support that North Korea has been receiving from Russia, it seems as though a full-scale development of an ICBM is actually underway. And just yesterday, North Korea conducted a carbon fiber solid fuel engine test for an ICBM, and Kim Jong-un himself was there. What kind of message is Pyongyang trying to portray with this?
It's in line with their foreign policy in the last couple of years. In January 2021, Kim Jong-un announced a 5-year military modernization plan. And at the heart of this modernization plan basically was the diversification of its missile systems. And we see that they focus particularly on missile systems that are faster to launch, harder to detect, and nearly, in North Korea's view, make it nearly impossible to intercept them. And of course, this is in line, in a way, with their policies of the last couple of years, which focus very much on this military modernization.
So we'll probably see more of their, such kind of efforts going on. But now let's bring in the European perspective. Ever since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and North Korea and Russia's cooperation, how has North Korea-Russia alliance actually affected EU's stance towards Pyongyang?
Well, traditionally, we have diplomatic relations. Most EU member states have diplomatic relations with North Korea. And traditionally, Europe used those diplomatic relations not as a mediator, but more as a facilitator. We saw this in Sweden very often in the past, that they were successful in bringing the major conflict parties together in Europe. Also, a lot of informal dialogue channels we had in the past, and of course since the COVID lockdown and North Korea's policy change, all of this is on hold at the moment. I would say for Europe, due to North Korea's participation in an active war in Europe, the perception of North Korea threat for Europe multiplied. And we see that this is a true expression of the often quoted overlaps between the security dynamics in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. And this is arguably the most vivid example of this. So for Europeans, of course, having North Koreans fight in an active war in Europe changed its outlook on North Korea dramatically, in the sense that it is not only perceived now in Europe as a proliferation threat, but as a direct military threat to Europe as well, not only in conventional security terms, but also in the sense of North Korean cyber operations in Europe, which are conducted on a regular basis. And all of these things, I think, changed the strategic thinking in Europe when it comes to North Korea, that we cannot sit idly by or sit back and wait this out. This North Korea threat is far too big for Europe too to ignore.
Right. Now, you've previously also mentioned about this, and you suggested that the EU should consider sending a special envoy to North Korea as well. But, ever since the Russia-Pyongyang ties have tightened, it seems this political dialogue have come to a halt. So now, what do you think are some good steps needed to, reopen diplomatic engagement between EU and North Korea?
I mean, we saw that the first European countries went back to North Korea, reopened their embassies. We saw this with Sweden, but also with Poland. So we see first steps, but these are initial steps. We are nowhere near where we have been before. In my view, I think that in the current climate, it's very difficult politically for European countries to engage directly with North Korea while North Koreans fighting in an active war in Europe against a country which is considered a partner for most of the EU member states with Ukraine. So in this climate, it's very difficult to launch a formal diplomatic initiatives, but what we can do and what we did in the past is to go to the informal level, to see if we can reopen channels of communication with North Korea, maybe first on an informal level, but of course that depends if North Korea wants to re-engage with European countries in that kind of format. Because in the past, they often used these dialogue channels with Europe or also with South Korea to ultimately reach the US. Now there is a direct channel between the leaders of North Korea and the US. So it's not clear if North Korea truly wants to re-engage with Europe on this matter. But we should at least try. And I'm convinced that opening channels of communication is indispensable. Ultimately, it's very, very important to do this also, so that we can ensure that we don't have miscommunication or misreading of the other side's actions.
Right, so we really have to keep knocking the door. And as you said a while ago, Europe is really no longer detached from, security issues in this Indo-Pacific region. So how do you think the EU can actually contribute to, the peace-building process and stability on the Korean Peninsula?
You know, I think that we can't play the role as a mediator because we are not independent in this conflict. We are firmly on the side of South Korea. We saw this last year with Germany's accession to the United Nations command, and this prevents us to play an independent role in this conflict. But as I mentioned, what we can do is facilitate, maybe bring major parties of this conflict together, and we were successful in doing that in the past because we are not a major security player in this region compared to the US and other countries. But we have an interest and a stake in the Indo-Pacific. And our interest in the Indo-Pacific is not only economic. We have a security interest in the region. And so to that end, I would say that it's extremely important that we keep engaged in the region, that we increase our or even strengthen our relation with countries like South Korea and Japan, especially also on security issues.
Right. So Europe's involvement would definitely be important in the months to come. Now, let's also touch upon defense cooperation. So South Korea and Europe have been expanding defense cooperation, most notably through the K2 tank export deal with Poland. And you previously noted that Europe is set to sharply increase its defense budgets in the coming years. Do you think this kind of a growing partnership contribute to stabilize the situation in the peninsula?
Primarily, I would say our closer defense industrial relations contribute to both sides' goal of and objective of diversifying also our security relations and security partnerships. I think this is key. You know, if this stabilizes the situation on the Korean Peninsula, it's very difficult to say. But ultimately, it's for both sides, for the European countries and for South Korea, it's extremely important to strengthen these defense industrial relations because we create win-win situations. Of course, Korean companies are now a formidable competitor to European defense companies. But we are also cooperating very closely. And if you take the case of Germany, for example, German-Korean defense industrial cooperation in the past were primarily characterized by technological knowledge and parts, weapon parts that were sent from Germany to Korea. And this one-sided relationship, of course, has changed dramatically to the degree that now, of course, we have weapon systems, Korean weapon systems that are equipped with, for example, German missiles. But now, of course, we see a whole change in this relationship in the sense that South Korea now aims for localized production in Europe, what we saw in Poland already, but with the plans of, for example, companies like Hanwha Aerospace that actively seek to localized production also in East Germany. And I think to acknowledge how vast the change is in our bilateral defense industrial relations, that it can create win-win situations. And especially for us in Europe, and if we take the German case again, it will take us a couple of years to rebuild our defense base. And we don't have the means in Germany alone to build this up by our own. We need reliable partners in the defense industrial sector, and of course Korea is one of the close partners here, and I'm very positive that this defense industrial cooperation will prosper in the years to come.
Right, definitely it's a very crucial cooperation that will, also shape long-term regional deterrence.
And also one of the policy fields that is shared by both and agreed on by both the conservative and liberal parties in Korea. This is a bipartisan issue in Korea, which makes it also a long-term issue for our relationship.
Definitely. Now, speaking of Germany, Dr. Balba, you've also participated in this Korea-Germany Unification Advisory Committee discussing lessons from, Germany's unification. So what kind of, practical takeaways can Korea actually learn and draw from Germany's experience?
First off, I have to say I'm very skeptical when we talk about a German model, because on the macro level, on the systemic level, the differences between the Korean case and the German case are just immense. If we only think back to the fact that there was a war fought between North and South Korea, and we never had an inter-German war, which changed the dynamic of the future relationships dramatically. Nonetheless, I would say we have some very important aspects to look at. More look at the micro level would be my suggestion. Discussing questions like what happened to how did the integration of the West and East German military happen? In specific, in detail, what happened to East German nurses, teachers, doctors? To look at these lessons, I think, could be of value. And of course, if there is anything to learn from the German case, I would say it's that unification policies must be structured long-term. And I think this is a challenge for South Korea, because North Korea policy and unification policy, of course, changes dramatically when there is a change in government. And I think this is one of the things which differentiates the German case from the Korean case, because we had quite the consistency. Of course, there were differences in policies when there was a change in administration in Germany. But the broader objectives of Germany, West Germany's unification policy, were shared by all the ruling parties, governing parties in Germany. And I think this is one of the big challenges for South Korea, to structure a long-term unification policy. And a third aspect we might add, and we come back to what we already talked about, there were, from the 60s onwards, even before, there were always open communication channels. It differentiated on the diplomatic level, but there was a continuous communication between East and West Germany. And this is particularly crucial when we talk about emergency communication channels, so that we can avoid maybe an unintended escalation of the military situation. To avoid things like this, it's so important to have open channels of communication. And of course, I know that this is especially challenging when we talk about North Korea. Again, big difference to East Germany, but this should be, I think, on the top of the agenda of the new South Korean administration, to open these communication channels, especially emergency communication channels, to at least decrease and lessen the likelihood of a conflict on the Korean Peninsula.
Right, very important insights, reviving inter-Korean communication and also coming up with a really, steady, long-term plan in terms of unification.
And ultimately, of course, this is not only a political decision. This long-term unification policy in the Korean case too must be shared and accepted, of course, by the South Korean people. Mainly. It cannot be a political decision alone. It must ultimately be shared and accepted and supported by the Korean people themselves. And I think this is, if we look at the German case again, one of the crucial lessons, because ultimately German unification began not so much on the political level, but more on the level of the people, with the East German people rising up. And this was the I would say, the major factor that ultimately contributed to German unification.
Right, a very strong note that we'll have to end on today. But thank you so much for your insights tonight, Dr. Balba.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.